It's really important for investors to keep flying the green flag and pressuring companies, because that's how things will change.
There's no point in being a lithium company that produces lithium to power the car going forward if you screw up the environment as you go.
Let's get started with our miners panel. So I'm really happy to welcome Kelly Earle, Senior Vice President, Corporate Development at Skeena, and Andrew Phillips, Executive Director at Lithium Power International, to talk about how they're making mining operations more environmentally friendly. So to kick things off, I think it would be really great if each of you could introduce yourselves, your companies, and tell us what you're all about. Kelly.
Thanks.
It should be on.
Thanks. Happy to be here. Is it on? Now it is. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So my name's Kelly Earle, Corporate Development for Skeena Resources. Skeena is a TSX and New York Stock Exchange listed development stage mining company. Our flagship project is called Eskay Creek. It's a former past producing mine that we acquired from Barrick. It's the former highest grade gold mine in the world, and we're looking at bringing it back into production in 2025. And it will be one of the lowest carbon dioxide emitting mines in the world when we get it back into production. So I think that's one of the reasons why we were asked to be on this panel. Andrew?
Hi guys, Andy Phillips. Is it on? Andy Phillips, LPI, Lithium Power International, on the ASX here. Our flagship is in Chile, the Maricunga Salar. It's a lithium brine project. We are at the stages now of pre-construction, about to construct, once we get financing sorted out. Chile has got very extensive environmental regulations. Our EIA we got approved by the authorities middle of last year, early last year, and then it was finally approved fully end of last year. It's far-reaching. It goes all the way through kind of the fauna and flora, environmental, the local communities, working with the indigenous communities. So it's a far-reaching thing, 30,500 pages long, and a huge achievement for us to get that in Chile. One of the few ever has been achieved in the last little while in Chile. So that's, I guess, why I'm here. We've done a bit of good stuff over in Chile.
All right, great. And so I thought we could start by, getting a little bit deeper into what are you looking to do or doing in terms of decarbonizing your operations, and then also what do you see others, peers, competitors? What's happening in the market?
Sure. So I guess I'll start. So Eskay Creek, I said, is a former mine that produced during the late 90s and early 2000s. And it was all diesel powered when the mine was in operation. It was very remote. 50% of the operating costs were fuel historically. We are now very fortunate in that in British Columbia, we have our grid is mostly hydro powered. So we have access to 6 cents Canadian per kilowatt hour hydropower, which is only about 17 kilometers away. So we are looking to electrify our entire mine. I know this is very dependent on jurisdiction specifically. So we're very fortunate that we have an electrification of the grid. I've seen other miners in areas where it's a bit more remote try and get more creative. I know conveyors are becoming something that's of a lot more interest to groups, and also hydrogen fuel cells, which is also something that Skeena looked into. But for us, it was kind of a no-brainer to connect to the hydro facilities that were only 17 kilometers away.
Very impressive. I'll try to do my best here. So LPI and our project, we have got a green policy. We want to be carbon neutral within 3 years from production, and that is not a hope. That is definitely a goal. In Chile, 54% of the power is sustainable power produced, either by solar or mainly by solar. And in the area that we are, in the northern part of Chile, about I had the numbers on me, but I've got it quite blank here. About half of that will be able to produce kind of our solar energy out of the solar power grids. With our plant itself, our development of our plant, it's all going to be powered on electricity. The only thing we'll have in diesel will be one process which we can't do through electric. So it will be almost 100% electric, and the vast majority of that will be a renewable energy. Going a bit further with water, every miner needs water. We've got our water supply has been secured, and we're going to be producing about 30% of our water usage will be recycled water going through. And of course, with a salar, I'm not sure if you know what a salar is, but it is the water table underneath. It's a salt plain. Underneath the salt plain, there's a aquifer water basically, and the water there where the lithium is contained. We also will be looking at ways to recycle that and clarify and clean that to be able to use as well. So we've got a pretty clear picture about energy and water usage in our area, and as I said, kind of a carbon neutral goal within 3 years of production starting.
All right, great. Just as a reminder to those in the audience, we will take questions throughout. So if you have any questions, just raise your hand and I'll get a microphone over to you. And so there's this view that decarbonizing and transforming operations with renewable energy, et cetera, can be too costly for juniors. What's your view on this?
So I completely disagree. So specifically at Eskay Creek, I mentioned that it was 50% operating. Fuel was 50% of the operating costs historically. Now we're looking about 5% being our OPEX for energy costs. So I would say that in a time where renewables are becoming increasingly less expensive and the cost of fossil fuels has hit all-time highs, I'd say that's probably something more from the past and not so much into the future. So specifically in our case, not so much. And I'd say also for other renewables, they're becoming so much cheaper, so much more accessible around the world, be it wind, be it solar. And you've got companies that are bringing renewables to market. So you can do power purchase agreements to access those renewables. And I'm seeing more and more companies doing trade-off studies themselves and finding out, well, maybe it does make more sense to put out some wind power or some solar power. And the cost of fossil fuels these days are just so volatile and unpredictable that putting a little bit more money up front now can definitely help you save money and time in the future.
I agree completely. Being a junior doesn't mean that we are incompetent or tiny. We can, and we are building from scratch. So our engineering we've put together is with having be sustainable, being kind of responsible with the environment in our forefront of our mindset. So our design is all around sustainable energy and green energy. There's no point in being a lithium company that produces lithium to power the car going forward if you screw up the environment as you go. So our strategy as a board wasn't quite those words, but it was, let's go green straight away. Let's do what we can do for the environment. And as I said, kind of, it's easier for us. We aren't doing any retrofitting of our operation. It is purely from scratch. So, and going a little bit further, that doesn't excuse the big guys too. They need to lift their game and start to kind of to also embrace the green revolution because it's coming.
I mean, it's really interesting that you say that you've started out with this strategy, this green strategy. How did that come about?
I think the market wants it. Certainly our funders, when we've raised capital, we've always said we want to be green. And I think it's the responsibility of any miner going forward. It's historically been a dirty industry, dirty word, kind of, and really it has to kind of move with the times. The times are to go sustainable and to go green. And so our strategy has always been, and I guess our design has changed a couple of times over the last 3 or 4 years to become even more mindful of the need for that kind of sustainable energy and sustainable production.
And what about with Skeena? Has it always been the strategy?
Yes, it has. We're a young entrepreneurial team. It's kind of a no-brainer for me to be talking about sustainable. The way miners have operated in the past is unsustainable. I mean, catastrophic tailings dams, implosions, and blowing up Aboriginal sites. It just boggles my mind. It's a no-brainer for a younger generation that it is unsustainable to keep operating in the world like that. So for our team, from the very beginning, and especially when we found out we had the hydropower so nearby, it's one of the reasons we went after the 2 projects we have. We have another past producing mine called Snip. One of the main reasons we went after them is because of hydro facilities that were built off the original access road to the mine. Actually, after it was shut down, these hydro facilities were built. So yeah, it's always been a no-brainer for us that of course we should be moving forward in this ESG focused world. We specifically focus on our First Nations relations at Skeena. Our mine's going to be the first one in British Columbia with full First Nations consent. So this has always been part of our soul and who we are as a company. And we've seen investments specifically because of that. You know, our big corporates, I'd say groups like BlackRock, our second largest shareholder, sends me reports every year asking for our ESG credentials. What are you doing to decarbonize? What are your First Nations relations like? It's moved much beyond how many women have you got employed. It's moved way further than that. So it's a no-brainer to Skeena, and we've always operated this way, and we've gotten investors and amazing media coverage because of how we've operated.
And I'm older than you by probably 2 decades. Our board is not as young as probably yours, Skeeta's board. We have got some experience there. We've got some guys who've mined through the world, and even their mindset now is to go green. And just to jump on Kelly's thing, kind of the Kelly's point about the Indigenous people, kind of that is something which we are also very mindful of on the Salar, where we've got our project area. There's there's 4 different communities who are living on the Salar. But part of our environmental approval process is we embraced them and they embraced us. We get invited to the Christmas parties and the birthdays and christenings and things. One thing that we have got, unlike other salars, is that we freeholdly own the land there. So we kind of have got title. The title, of course, is always with the local communities and the traditional owners. But we own the land legally, and unlike other salars and other areas in Chile where there's been royalty, the land's leased and the government pay the government a royalty. We have pay no royalties to the government, but we are paying a voluntary royalty to the local communities, and that's given us. We didn't really want this. We didn't do it for the reason, but we get some good press and some good PR from the government in Chile, both local as well as federal. But our thoughts were that the Indigenous communities who live there are part of the soul of the place. It's a beautiful area, part of the world, and I guess our strategy is to embrace that and to give them some benefit of the outcome of our production going forward.
All right, great. And so, I mean, you've talked a bit about government support. How can governments, other industry players, investors best support miners' decarbonization efforts?
So I think regulators have a huge role to play. So in British Columbia, we have a carbon tax, and every corporation has to abide by that. And it's good for corporations because every amount of carbon that we save or capture is fewer tax dollars that we have to pay, and the tax dollars that we do pay on carbon go back into decarbonization efforts with the government. So it's a win-win. I'd say what investors can do and what institutions can do, what I've already mentioned, is keep talking about it. Bring it up on investor meetings. If you're a large institution or a company, send me a questionnaire. Send a company a questionnaire. What are you doing about decarbonization? What are you doing about First Nations relations? What are your goals? I mean, all across the board on ESG. I'd seen those for the first time in the last 2 years, and it led to Skeena actually hiring a corporate innovations manager whose full-time job is to focus on ESG and strategy as we move the mine forward. So things are changing. It's made us realize that we needed to do more on the ESG front. I mean, I'm a geologist by background, so as much as I like to talk about ESG, it was definitely worthwhile to hire someone in who could focus on it full time from a PR and also a strategy perspective. So I think those are things that we're doing moving forward. And it's really important for investors to keep flying the green flag and pressuring companies, because that's how things will change.
You said earlier that juniors, is it harder for juniors to do this? In fact, it's more important for juniors to do it and easier for because we rely on the investor to kind of develop our projects. We've got no cash flow now from other operations. Where the challenge really is not looking at the juniors, but looking at the big guys who have got income coming in. They've got dividends being paid to their shareholders. Unfortunately, the mighty dollar is often stronger than a environmental plan. And so we need to make sure that the big guys who are paying dividends to shareholders are playing their part. It's like kind of I put my bins out each day and recycle the cardboard and the paper. But if I'm just doing that, it's a small kind of thing. But it has to be a mass kind of understanding that we need to do it together. And us juniors, kind of Sika and Lithium Power, won't change the world by doing what we're doing. But certainly we can attract our investors who come in, and a big part of we raised $25 million just last month or so, and a big thing of that money came in from people who wanted to see and liked the story of what we're trying to do in our design. So it really comes down to investors, shareholders of larger companies start to demand their companies to rather than just give them a big dividend check each year, show us what you're doing for the environment. And that's, I think, a key thing that people have to remember, that we can't change the world by us juniors doing a few things.
But I think juniors have an amazing opportunity to change the narrative. It's much easier to plan ESG into your strategy before you're in a mine than to be reactionary and try to do it retroactively afterwards to change the mindset of everyone who's at an operating mine. So it's a huge opportunity, and I think there is a big weight on the shoulders of the juniors, and as there should be. I think it's our job to help try and change the industry for the better moving forward.
So I agree with that. Kind of, yeah, often I'm saying the same thing. Kind of, that we are in the same boat, and I'm very proud to be a junior doing our part.
You have a question?
I've got a question for both of you, but perhaps Andrew first. How is the technology that you're using or you're proposing to use, how does that environmental impact compare to traditional lithium extractions? And how proven is that technology?
Very good question, and I've got a very good answer for that as well. We are using the traditional process of pumping the water, the brine out of the land, of the salar, of the aquifer. Sorry, put it into peddling ponds basically, and then evaporating it off through solar. What's left behind is the solids, which is then the chemists do their magic tricks and separate lithium from sodium, from magnesium and potassium. So we're doing this big revolution about the direct extraction. I am skeptical of the whole thing. Firstly, because there's no big lithium producer using that technology at all right now. And our biggest asset we've got is our environmental assessment report approval. How direct extraction works, for layman's terms, and I'm not a geo either, is pump the water out, and they pull out the lithium somehow from the water and put the water back into the water table. So you're putting back water which has been changed. What does that mean to the environment? Who knows? In Argentina, with all the tests that have been done, they got more, I guess, open environmental rules than Chile have. So I'm pleased that we're in Chile, but we're getting a lot of grief from shareholders, uninformed shareholders, that basically weren't using that kind of. It's much cheaper. We're still kind of very, very cheap per ton. $3,700 per ton, US dollars per ton is the lower part of the cost curve. To save $500 per ton and pump water back into the environment without any knowledge of what's going in there is, I think, stupid. Not stupid. Kind of what's the word for it? Not showing responsibility for the environment. So we've got our eye on technology, but right now our design is the old traditional proven technology.
So Skeena is producing and shipping a gold concentrate, which is exactly what they did historically on the mine site. It's the nature of the ore body is really dictating how we extract the gold and silver. Like I said, we're very fortunate we're connecting to the grid, so our entire mill will be electrified. One of the other things that we're looking at right now is electrifying our fleet and also using a conveyor system to bring rocks into the mill. The challenge right now that we're finding with technology is batteries for large haulage trucks. So batteries have lower emission density than fossil fuels do. So you need really large batteries that are very heavy in huge haulage trucks for big open pit operations. and it's not quite there yet. The technology is not quite there. We've talked to big companies like Caterpillar. We've been very forward looking. We've put in orders for trucks. We've actually changed the size of our blocks, so how we're mining, so it can be smaller, so we can actually use smaller haulage trucks instead of the big ones, so that we can get the size batteries that we need. It's a lot easier for underground mines. You have smaller areas in which you're mining, so it's proven. And actually, it's a good example in underground mines how it's a proven technology that's paying off. You have, it's more cost effective, you have lower emissions, you have the knock-on effect of not having fuel from diesel having to be ventilated out of your underground operation. I don't see underground mines ever going back to fossil fuels. It just doesn't make any sense. So the challenge for us is the technology actually keeping up with what we want. And then of course there's supply chain issues that go along with that. Is we're one of how many mines around the world that wants massive haulage trucks with batteries in them. So I think those are some of the challenges that we're facing. And one of the ways that we're looking to mitigate that is with a conveyor system instead of just relying on haulage trucks completely.
Take another question.
Yeah. Kelly, this is a question for you. The first part of my question was around the mining fleet, which you've just answered, and I think you're right. I think conveyors will be a big part of that. The second part of the question, and I'll preface it by saying we're an investor in the gold in gold companies, is really the whole environmental impact of gold mining more generally, in that it's not like sort of lithium or copper or nickel, which has a battery metals element. Gold, it's more of a store of value. And so for people that say, well, gold's not really necessary, how do you answer that? Or gold mining's not necessary. How do you answer that from an environmental perspective?
So I'd say most of what humans do isn't really necessary now, is it? And I don't mean to be flippant, but what I mean is there's always going to be a need for gold. There's always going to be people mining gold. So shouldn't we try and be the best gold mining company we can be that focuses on ESG? I'd much rather work for a company that's trying to produce gold out of the ground 100% electrically with the best First Nations relations we've won awards for our First Nations relations. I'd rather be investing in a company like that that's going to take gold out sustainably instead of just brushing it aside and say, well, gold's not necessary, so I don't care how it comes out of the ground. I think that's completely the wrong way to look at it. Humans are humans. We're not going to change. Gold is always going to be a store of value. I would also comment that gold is used in electrics. So you do use it in cell phones, and it can be recycled from old phones, actually. So a good reason not to throw out your phone. There is gold that can be reused from it. But I agree with you. So all I'd say is if you are going to invest in gold as a store of value, just do your research and make sure you invest in companies that are producing it as ethically and most responsibly as humanly possible.
And so in terms of investment, to get these investment, the green investment dollars, do you think miners moving forward have to put more of an emphasis on the environmental factors?
Yes, 100%. Yeah. I think it's a change in the environment, as Kelly was saying before. It's generational change. Gone are the old crusty investors who want to kind of see a big pit in the middle of the desert or whatever. It has to be kind of moved. And I think for us, as we are developing and we're spade ready, and we're going through the process of getting project funding sort of or finalised. A big thing is, what are we doing? So I think the green dollar and the investment houses or the funders that we're talking to love the idea that this is a lithium company, that it's green energy, and our production is going to be carbon neutral within 3 years of production. So I think it is getting the story out there, getting the strategy out there, and the attraction. There's a lot of funds out there who all they want to do is invest in green. I know of a company out of Zurich who I work with outside Lithium Power, but for another thing that I'm involved with, and they will only invest in sustainable energy initiatives, including lithium. So I think it's really that comes down to the strategy that the company or the mining or the mine is trying to achieve, and then investors will come. And I think the retail investors too want to see. If I was saying to my wife, I'm going to invest in a tobacco company, I'd probably get divorced. But if I'm investing in a lithium company where it's green, then I think kind of my family would approve of that. So I think it's a change in mindset, and I think the younger generation coming through can see that us baby boomers have probably screwed up the environment a little bit too much, and it's time to get that turned around.
So I completely agree. It's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. I think one of the biggest challenges is the younger generation. It's difficult for me to get a younger generation interested in gold mining. It is a store of value, but there's so much more interest in Bitcoin and tech companies and whatever the latest flavor of the month is, which is unfortunate because there is so much store of value and wealth in owning something in gold. So it's one of the biggest challenges we've had as a company, especially as a young entrepreneurial team. I'm trying to hire a marketing director away from a tech company who can help us with a younger generation of investing. I think this is a challenge for the entire industry, and it's going to take the big boys focusing more on ESG to finally get a younger generation more interested in the mining space.
Well, I think what's interesting is that people are interested in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, but they're actually environmentally very unfriendly. So yeah, we at our event in Singapore last week, there was a lot of discussion about kind of the gold versus crypto space, and getting the younger generation back interested in gold. So we've been talking quite a bit about Scope 1 emissions, but I think it's also good to talk about the Scope 3, or those that occur at any point within your company's value chain. How do you manage these?
Yeah, so I mean, it's more difficult, especially when you're a development stage company, because stage 1 is something that's within my operational control. Stage 3 right now, the biggest thing that we're focused on is how our staff and employees get to mine sites. So that is something that until now has been very, fuel intensive. So one of the ways we're looking at managing it is through supply chain management. So when we're looking at suppliers and local partners and things that we use, do they have ESG strategies? Are they using, for example, are there electric buses that could bring the fleet to site as opposed to fuel consuming buses? Are there, electric trucks that we can use to bring our goods and supplies back and forth? And that's one of the main ways we're focused on is our supply chain management. And then otherwise, from a corporate level, there's really easy things you can do. There's something that I just instilled company-wide was buying locally. So if there's any kind of swag or promotional material or anything like that we buy, you have to buy it locally. And if you can't buy it within British Columbia, then you have to buy it within Canada. There's no need for me to be buying jackets and t-shirts that are made in China that have been polluting as they come across the ocean. So I'm just saying there's very small things you can do even from a corporate level to help with your emissions, just like buying locally.
The upstream and downstream is hard to control. But what we're going through our EPC process now to kind of to select our engineering firm to construct our mine or our plant on the Salar. So basically, kind of we've down to the final two. A big criteria was what are they doing as far as sustainability, and happy to say that the two we've got are world-class operators who have got a very good good strategy around kind of green energy and that type of good things. Our design, as I said, is all around being green, and I guess what we're going to be doing is we're going to be producing, rather than shipping hunks of rock with a bit of lithium inside miles and miles and miles, we are producing lithium carbonate on site. So we'll be sending out, pure white powder. It's not cocaine. It is lithium. Pure white powder down by electric kind of trucks down the main highway between Chile and Argentina, down to the port, and then our end users of this lithium will most likely be kind of battery producers, and they've got their own strategy around ESG and that kind of thing. So I think kind of you can't control what everyone does, but certainly we are selecting our partners based on what their strategy is.
All right, great. Any questions from the audience before we continue on?
Kelly, if you can just give us a little bit more, information just on the carbon tax in British Columbia, when it was introduced, what the rate is, like just obviously from an Australian perspective, it's
Sure.
just really interesting to have a bit more history in terms of the acceptance and, the teething issues along the way.
So to be quite honest, I wish I could give you more detailed information
okay.
on timing
That's
and cost, but I don't have that at my fingertips.
That's all right.
I'm not going to lie. I have a corporate innovations manager who helped me prep for this panel today. I know it's been around for some time, and there was a lot of grumblings and groanings from corporations when it was put in place, but BC government partially got elected because of its green credentials and reconciliations with Indigenous peoples. So that's what the people of BC wanted, and that's what happened. And it's been in effect for a while now, and that's what's going to be happening moving forward. So all corporations just have to deal with it.
But
I
on
was
that-
just going to
on-
say, actually, within Chile, I was there just last week. So I wonder whether you're able to comment on, the situation there and what you expect the progression might be.
The tax, there's corporate taxes there, obviously, and there's a component of carbon tax as part of the corporate tax. What it is, I can't tell you what the exact amount is, but what I was going to say is that's something which Australia should be looking at. We've got a small a small exploration program in Western Australia as well, and it's just it has to be some kind of penalty, some kind of real tangible tax process around carbon tax and that kind of thing. It has to be some kind of, I'm not sure how we do it. Maybe ask the government how to do that. But certainly there has to be some kind of sustainable and real tangible tax process, which is for all mining companies, all companies in general.
I think when you look at the suite of metals at the moment, though, I mean, everybody is making margin, let's say, on certainly the battery raw materials and copper, nickel, lithium. It's just really that process of being able to put the tax on, and it's something that we all get used to, like the GST here in Australia or something like that. It's just a blanket tax. I mean, we've just looked at it from our nickel analysis, so just say $100 per tonne on top of the industry. It doesn't change the game, it's just really about trying to transition over. So that's why I was just really interested in.
And then all the tax, all the tax dollars we pay go for the carbon tax, go right back into decarbonization and making things like hydro plants and solar plants and everything like that. So it's really a win-win. And I guess I'm a bit surprised to hear that Australia does not have a carbon tax in place currently.
They did try a couple of governments ago, but it was rejected outright. But I think we've come a very long way in quite a short time. So I would expect that, that conversation is still something that's being developed. Thank you.
Thanks for those questions. We are kind of nearing the end of the hour, but I have a few more questions that I wanted to ask the panel. So there is a lot of kind of public relations scrutiny on the mining industry, especially due to ESG factors. How do miners address these?
So we have an amazing opportunity to change the narrative, actually. We can benefit disproportionately by focusing on ESG. So for an industry that never focused on ESG to suddenly start focusing on ESG, we can really have the opportunity to change the PR narrative into that of a cleanup story. I will give you an example. There is a very left-leaning newspaper in Canada. I won't mention them by name, but they're very left-leaning, and they wrote an article on Skeena. The first time ever, they wrote a favorable article on a mining company. And that's because we created a nature conservancy with our First Nations partners. So I would say, yes, of course, there's bad PR. And for reasons I mentioned earlier, justifiably so, it's not been the cleanest and greenest industry. We have such an amazing opportunity to change how people are talking about it, to find new investors, to push this ESG narrative, to really show that, yes, mining was dirty. We are in the process of changing it. We can keep changing it. And we need investors to keep pushing the big companies so that everyone keeps getting on this train of changing the PR narrative and having more good stories about miners out there, because not all mining companies are created equal. Do your research and really put your time and energy to those that are doing some good for the world.
I agree. Well done. That was a great answer. Can't really add much to that, but I guess you need to walk the walk and talk the talk. So you can't have a policy and some PR stuff without doing the hard work as well. And that's where real tangible kind of processes around ESG, around sustainability have to be real, not just kind of a policy you put up once a year on a website. So that's something which kind of we're going to be doing, and we are doing. So, but you're right. The perception of the Victorian coal miner going down, coming back at night, and or dirty and things, and the large pits have to change, and it is a process that will go through. With our lithium project, for example, it's easier because it is not a big pit. It is a little bit more subtle in its approach, but still it's still mining, and it's still kind of taking stuff out of the earth. In saying that, we've also got some exploration projects over in Western Australia, and we all know that kind of open pit mining in Western Australia is in the DNA of Western Australians, and so we need to work out how we best control that process as well, and you know, as Claire said before, working with the local communities, kind of making sure that the heritage sites are protected, and if they aren't protected, then the company isn't going to slap on the wrist; they get a serious slap on the wrist, and the shareholders should get upset about that as well. So that's the whole thing that has to change. Is the fact that it is a move away from the old mining days into the new age mining, which is sustainable. It is responsible to the environment, both kind of for people as well as for fauna and flora.
So, my last question. So, at the moment, a lot of companies are really just at the beginning process of this. As you can tell, we only got 2 panelists for this session today. I'm hoping that next year we have many, many more. What's next for the industry moving forward? What are some of the key areas that you think miners can be focusing on?
So I think electrification and the movement of battery energy and being able to make better batteries are key focuses. We've got a long way to go. I think the future holds vast improvements in tailings management. I think that's going to become key moving forward. I think carbon capture is another area where you should see a lot of movements. And I think that the easiest one for companies to do that doesn't rely on outside technologies is really reconciliation and consent from Indigenous peoples. I mentioned before that Eskay Creek will be the first mine in British Columbia with true First Nation consent. We are extremely proud of the reconciliation efforts that are going on in British Columbia right now. So under the guise of the United Nations declarations on the rights of the Indigenous peoples, I think every country in the world should be adopting this if they haven't already, and every mining company should be looking at reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. It's the easiest thing that you can do on an ESG standfront that doesn't rely on any outside sources. It's just you getting to know your local communities, working with them, finding out what their needs are, and every company has zero excuse for not doing it. So I think that's what the future holds for mining.
I love the idea about battery technology being number one because that's what we do. Yeah, I think we've already gone through everything that has to be done. It just has to be a real effort by all. You know, investors need to walk away from companies that they don't think are green enough for them. You know, the mighty dollar, unfortunately, is often stronger than a moral stand. But I think of for us to be here in 40 years' time, 50 years' time, my granddaughter to grow up in a world just half decent, we need to change things now. And so the design that we've got for our Marakunga project is only one of a $650 million US dollar capital build. Only one component is not going to be kind of electrified. It's because it can't be. But all it's going to be liquefied. It's all going to be, you know, the vast majority will be solar energy. As Kelly was saying, working with the communities is critically important. We've got that in writing in our environmental impact assessment to an extent where not only did going through the process, we submitted our report. There's a little bit of a side here, but it's quite a little funny little one. We put it our report in, and the 4 different communities on Salar or in the area were all included in our report, and all part of the public review process. Another community in the far south corner of Chile said, "Hey, we want to be part of this too," and we said, "Well, sorry, you aren't part of the Salar area, so we can't kind of include you in the royalty that we're paying." But I was quite tempted to. So that's what I guess, looking after the communities, working with the communities. They are the custodians of the land, but also the development that we've got in our build of our mine is as far as we can at this stage. But as I said before, the goal of being zero carbon neutral in 3 years' time. One last point I'll make is that the power to change the companies is in the shareholders' hands. If they are annoyed with what's going on, if they can vote by walking, they can vote by changing the board, all those kind of things. So it is I said there's the green dollar and there's the green energy and the green kind of world, which is more valuable going forward, a green dollar or the greenback or the green world. And basically that's where I stop my rant, I guess.
Well, I think that's a really good rant and a really nice place to leave off with some really kind of hopeful notes moving forward. So thank you to our panelists, Kelly and Andrew, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.